Hello, everyone. Everyone's so excited. They're like, start the show, start the show. I'm like, you're a riot going on over there in YouTube land, but we're
You got
here.
it.
We're
We're
here.
here.
We're ready to go. And my email just went off. Let me turn that off. And we have perhaps everyone's favorite guest of all time, Mr. Ryan Dancey, who I think on Friday was smoking a big cigar and sitting back with his little glass of cognac and just going, yeah, that's right. That's right. We won. We won. It has to feel pretty good. It has to feel pretty good that your OGL stood up the test of. I mean, this is what everyone hopes in back of their mind. Whenever you write something like this, you secretly wonder, like, you don't want it to come to this, but if it does come to this, you want to make sure it actually would survive, like, a war like this, and it did, and it won. I mean,
yeah,
what
it was.
what
It
do you
was a
think of
pretty
this whole
amazing
thing?
feeling. I had a group of people all gathered at the house that my company rents in Las Vegas for a gaming weekend, and we were in the middle of a game, and all of a sudden my phone just went crazy. So it was a pretty wild experience. I had to go outside and shout loudly. My neighbors probably are convinced a madman lived in the house.
Well, they wouldn't be wrong.
That's true.
And you shouted loudly. The two.
Yeah, those are both true. Right.
Right, there you go.
Yes, it was quite the moment.
I know. I mean, if anyone said they expected Wizards to give up, they're lying. I
I didn't expect him to give up.
I didn't expect him to give up.
Yeah.
I didn't expect. I did. I was stunned.
I was that whole week before. I was tossing and turning I couldn't sleep because I was trying to figure out how to convince myself that I had to form a legal defense fund and sue them, which I don't want to do, didn't want to do. I didn't want to spend any part of 2023 on this problem.
Right.
And it was just like, how am I not going to be forced into doing this thing I don't want to do? Because I thought it was going to come to that. I thought someone was going to have to sue them.
Yeah, and I was getting, my lawyers were ready. Like, they were ready because I wasn't going anywhere. I was like, I'm going to keep using OGL, and if they come after me, and every time I call them, they'd be like, Hasbro sue you yet? I'm like, not yet. I was like,
it was amazing to see how many people stood up for it, but it was also kind of depressing to see how many people who should have known better essentially said, well, Wizards has drawn a line in the sand and they will never back down, and we should start to figure out how to make a compromise, which I was infuriated by. But in the end, it turns out that wasn't much of a red line.
No, I mean,
We were all surprised by how much it wasn't a line in the sand. Like, I actually thought that people who said that they weren't going to back down on that were right. It just didn't necessarily mean that I could find a compromise that would work for our business model at all that gave that up, because there wasn't really a compromise that gave that up.
Yeah, I didn't think they were going to give up, but I did think they could be beaten. Although I will say, and I was pretty public about this, once they started to move, it meant they were standing on ice, and they could move all the way back to the start point because they hadn't actually done anything. And that was a critical point I tried to make really clear to people. They talked about deauthorizing, but they didn't actually do it. And so backing down from that position of talking about it is way easier than trying to unwind it if they actually claim to have done it.
Mm-hmm.
So once they started to move, I did think there was a chance they could move all the way without having to be sued first. And it turns out there was.
Yeah, I mean, altogether, the entire fight was only like 3 weeks long.
2 weeks, basically.
Yeah,
from the time you and I had that show, the three of us were on the show, to the time they capitulated, I think was just over 2 weeks.
I mean, it felt like 3 years. It really did. I mean, it was amazing.
It was 3 weeks. It wasn't very long, as things considered. And, I think from the time that they showed that license to third parties, hang on. Popular guy today.
You are.
From the time they showed that license to third parties, which was around the 21st of December, it was 6 weeks, start to finish.
Yeah, I mean, it is kind of amazing, but I think it was, I think we had a lot of things going for us. It was January, it was slow news. I mean, there was nothing going on, like nothing. So this was a story that everyone was picking up. So it got national news, it got worldwide coverage. Like it was getting coverage in Yahoo, and I saw Yahoo talking about it, and they had the silliest one because like it was like, weren't the kids in Stranger Things playing Dungeons and Dragons? I was like, oh my god, it was like cringeworthy watching these people. But everyone was talking about it. You have the movie coming out, which they have to promote because they're on Paramount's schedule, and Paramount is probably pushing them and is furious with them, and they have to listen to Paramount because if they ever want to do another movie again, they're not in charge. Paramount is, so they have to listen to them. They have the TV show they wanted to promote. They have Vox Machina and Critical Role, who's like eating their lunch and like showing off their new, their new deal with Amazon.
Deal. Yeah.
And they have a new product coming out in like a couple of weeks, and they're not even doing any promotion on it. I was like, they gotta get rid of this, and they gotta get rid of this quick. Like really quick, and they can't have this latching. Like this was supposed to go into mid-February, and this might have gone on for another month. And I think they're like, we got to get rid of it now, and just do whatever you have to. Like just get rid of it, and they did very quickly, stunningly quickly.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
To the point,
it just goes to show that just because a big corporation does something you don't like doesn't mean that it is a fait accompli.
Yeah, I mean that's the other thing. I can't even believe. When we won, it's like, I can't even believe we really won. It's like, I still can't believe it. It's kind of...
Yeah. Well, I mean, we should talk about that because I think that my personal short-term objective was achieved, which is that they did not attempt to deauthorize 1.0A. And that's great. That is the minimum they need to do. There is a lot more they are going to need to do in terms of repairing their credibility with the community. And I think they have actually done themselves more harm than good by dual licensing under the CC BY license. So maybe that's something you want to talk about. I don't know, but they're not back to square one.
Yeah, no, it's actually, I mean, realistically, we won the battle and probably most of the war, but it's still not over. Sure. And obviously 6th edition, everyone's like, well, what's that going to be? And I'm like, dude, that's going to be a total closed garden. And I'm sure that thing is going to be atrocious, the GSL, whatever they're coming out with. But as long as it's not affecting 5th edition and the OGL, I couldn't care less. It doesn't really affect me directly.
Yeah. And if they continue to do the thing they said, which is that it will be backwards compatible, then it's essentially no different than making 6th edition open.
100% not going to be backwards compatible. I guarantee you,
you
that.
Don't think?
I do not think, and from everyone I'm talking to, there is no way it's going to be backwards compatible. They did that to save sales so that 5e wouldn't go off a cliff.
But then now they've created a tremendous expectation. So when we did 3rd edition, we were very clear with people that it was not backwards compatible with 2nd edition.
Right.
Like we told people, you will probably be able to recreate a lot of 2nd edition stuff in 3rd edition, but 3rd edition is not mechanically compatible with 2nd edition. Like we didn't want to have that out there in the world with people throwing it back in our face and saying, why do you think this is compatible? Like it isn't. Let's be clear about that. So, I mean, they've done the opposite. They have said it will be compatible. So now they get to own that, I guess.
They made qualified statements, if I remember correctly. I'd have to go back and look. And they said that, like, you'd be able to, like, use the same stories and that certain things would be compatible, but other things, like how you built your characters, would change. If I recall correctly, something like that. It would be compatible with the adventures, maybe they said. I need to look at the exact wording of what they said would be compatible, but I feel like it was some, but not all.
Well, but what really matters is what lives in the brains of their consumers. What did their consumers hear them say? Not what did they say?
That's fair.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's get to the super chat, and then let's talk about the CC BY 4.0. Boy, I sure love it. Let's talk about the OGL 1.0 CC BY SRD 5.1 4.0. Go.
Yeah.
So the one super chat before that is someone 7761 for $20 said, does Orc still have a role to play after Wizards' recent decision?
What was the question? I'm sorry.
Does the Orc license, ORC, from that is being written up now still have a role to play after what C's recent decision?
I 100% yes. I know a lot of those people, and they are in the future. They are not living in the past. They have now basically been unshackled from the OGL, and they are free to do whatever they want to do. And they have a point in time when they can say, this is why we're doing this thing, which we otherwise would never have contemplated. I will put a marker in the ground right now and say that Wizards of the Coast is going to sign on to that project. I think that is one of their only routes out of the mess that they're in right now.
Wow. You think, I'll put it this way. I wouldn't be stunned. I would be maybe surprised, but I actually see that I agree with you, is if they sign on to it, and if they say, look, we messed up. We're part of the community. We're all singing Kumbaya together. We want to join you. We're coming over to the light side. You know, it's like they have to do it.
We want a seat at the table when the terms of the license are being discussed before it is finalized. Like the time to participate is now, not 6 months from now. I don't know if they're going to do it now.
Right.
I feel like it is part of their route out of this wilderness they've put themselves into, is to basically rejoin the community as a good player and be a part of a broader thing other than just themselves. Right now, they're on an island all by themselves, and that's got to be very lonely.
And also, all the developers
they've been trying to build.
Yeah, and all the developers for WotC, you know, they're all in Seattle, and they're all very friendly with the people that are doing Orc. You know,
that's right.
You know, these people all know each other. It's not that big a community.
Exactly right. Very small community.
Right. So I can't. I actually agree that would be the right thing to do. Whether they do it, I'm not sure. I do think.
I mean, even Microsoft eventually joined a bunch of open source projects.
Oh yeah. Right? Oh, and they make more money.
Finally, right?
They make more money when they start. Yeah, when they gave up, when Microsoft finally gave up trying to make everything work on Microsoft products and everything on Microsoft, you know, everything was supposed to be on Microsoft servers, Microsoft Office, Microsoft everything, and they gave up and went open source. They're making more money on Azure and open source than they ever did on their Windows products, and they haven't looked back. And it's like, dude, you're gonna stop. We actually call this, there's actually a term for this, maybe you've heard this before, Ryan. It's called kicking and screaming to the money tree.
Right.
It's a real term. It's a real term.
Don't make me.
Right. It's like what? So when the studios, I don't remember the studios, they fought viciously for DVDs. They fought against DVDs tooth and nail.
Put a licensing fee of $15 a disc on every blank media sold in America.
Yeah, they fought DVDs kicking and screaming, and then DVDs came out and they like tripled their profit because of DVDs. A huge amount of money. Yeah. Right, and it's like kicking and screaming to the money tree. Like, no, we don't want it. Here's all this money. Oh, okay. It's like the same thing. Like, WotC, stop it.
The thing that's really interesting for them, for Wizards, is that one of the defects in the OGL is how poorly it deals with the question of software, and that is also the exact same problem. For the exact same reason is in the CC BY4 license. So if they join the ORC participation process and they have a voice in that license, maybe they can get a reasonable and understandable mechanism built into it to handle software, which would be great for everybody. So yeah, there is at least some upside for them in joining a new licensing regime if they can address that software question.
So why don't we address the elephant in the room, which is very interesting, which now we've had a little time to look at it, and I haven't talked to my lawyer or my IP attorney yet, but everyone's very curious because it looks like whoever made the decision of putting SRD 5.1 into Creative Commons, I don't think they meant to do what they did, and now it's very interesting to see what is coming out, because there was a lot more in there that I think anyone realizes, like way more.
Yeah. I mean, it was the original system reference document, the 5.1 system reference, the original I wrote, but that was a long time ago.
Right.
The 5.1 system reference document was clearly written to be used with the Open Gaming License. And the Open Gaming License has a provision where you can identify parts of the work as product identity.
Right.
And then the terms of the Open Gaming License open content portion of the license do not apply. So it is okay to mix elements that you want to have be open game content and mix it and content that you want to be product identity in the same piece of text. That's what the OGL is designed for. But the Creative Commons license doesn't have that system embedded in it. And so when they licensed the system reference document 5.1 with Creative Commons, they licensed a ton of intellectual property, which was not licensed as open game content with the Open Gaming License. And I just have so many questions. Like, did they not understand that? were the people that were doing that, taking that action of issuing the document with the CC BY license. Did they just not understand what was in the system reference document? Did they just not care? Like, were they told, stop, we're bleeding, stop the bleeding, do something this morning? Like, there's so many questions. There are things in the system reference document 5.1 available under the Creative Commons license, which are pretty valuable. Mm-hmm. For years, there have been monsters that were excluded from the open game content releases for the various system reference documents for 3.0, 3.5, D20 Modern, which for a variety of reasons, Wizards of the Coast believes it has a proprietary ownership level of. Well, all of those things are in the 5.1 system reference document. They may not be completely in there. There aren't pictures of the monsters and there aren't stat blocks for the monsters, but the names of the monsters are in there. There are the names of a bunch of Forgotten Realms deities in there, which is, that's like putting Darth Vader under the Creative Commons license. Like, you've licensed characters of your intellectual property. Mm-hmm. It looks like it's on accident to me, but it can't be fixed. Like, it's irrevocable. So if you want to write a novel and you want to have the Forgotten Realms gods in it, and you're okay making part of your novel Creative Commons BY licensed, you could totally do that now. Yeah, it's wild.
Yeah, but what does it actually say? That when I talk to my IP attorney, is that okay? So Beholder is in there, but what does that mean? Like, yeah, like what does it mean? Because it's barely referenced, and it's referenced as like part of a card set. So it's like,
yeah, that's right.
And as an example, so I'm like, okay, what does that mean? What can you do? Can I make a Beholder race now? Can I write a Beholder stat block for a monster? Like, what am I allowed to do with that? And I don't know if you can even answer that, but it's like, just having the name in there doesn't necessarily mean you have full reign and access to everything. Beholder.
Yeah, that's right. So all of these licenses are an attempt to define the boundaries of copyright in an area where the boundary of copyright is extremely vague. So if you want to use the licenses in the way they are intended, you would not try to push the envelope. You would assume anything which is not forbidden is forbidden. Anything which is not permitted is forbidden. That's the safe place to be. Well, now the gray area is the line is moved a little bit. So clearly you can use the name Beholder without being in the gray area. But what can you use it with? Well, that's the gray area again. So you just have to decide for yourself how much legal risk you're willing to take on a product that you may sink, the credit card into, or the home mortgage, or, the money of your friends and family. There are probably people that, well, we'll talk about this in detail, but there are people who will definitely take it as carte blanche and say, oh, it's in. I can use any part of the Beholder IP that's ever been published anywhere by Wizards of the Coast. That one word unlocks the kingdom. There are people that will have that idea. And there are other people that will say, wow, you can't touch it at all. Like, you can put the word Beholder in your product, but it cannot look like a giant floating sphere with a giant central eye and a big toothy mouth and 10 I-beam tentacles. Like, they'll take the other position. Like, don't touch it. It's dangerous. So in that sense, they have probably not hurt themselves on the Beholder question as badly as they hurt themselves on the Forgotten Realms of deities and a few other things, but it isn't good. It's not an improvement from their standpoint.
Yeah, it's it was stunning. I guess they had to, it was interesting because they could have just said, okay, we listened to you. We're not going to deauthorize OGL 1.0A. And that's it. That's all they could have said. But they
could have just done that. Yeah. Exactly. It would have been way smarter, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I think they absolutely confused themselves by asking that question in the survey. Do you want this content licensed with Creative Commons? And of course they got 80% of the people said yes. Because 80% of the people don't understand any of how these copyright licenses work. They don't understand the complexities. They said yes. And so I guess somebody at Hasbro said, well, they want it, so we should give it to them.
It was like 65% were in favor, and most of the ones who weren't was only because what they had offered were like obviously uncopyrightable rules that didn't matter whether they were in the Creative Commons or not.
They shot themselves in the foot by going down the route of saying, okay, we're going to put like 5% as Creative Commons. I was like, oh, such a rookie mistake. You never go down that path.
Yeah.
It's like if you're going to give out 5%, you better get ready to give out 100% because that's never going to be enough.
They were apparently ready to give out 100%.
Obviously they were. I guess they were ready. I don't think they were, but I think that someone thought, oh, it's a good idea, and we'll give them 5%. That should be enough. But we'll never give them 100%. And I was like, that's not how you do that. That's a rookie business mistake, man.
Yeah, I didn't even bother analyzing that 1.2 document. I got to the first page where they said that the OGL 1.0 was deauthorized and stopped reading. Like, I don't even care. Like, that's my battle. My battle ended on page 1. What comes after that, that's somebody else's problem.
Right. We had our 3 pillars, which I think are more or less destroyed now. It's like I said, because everyone was going through and doing these like analyzations and going through like line by line. I'm like, OGL still isn't, it's like they could still revoke the license at will for a morality clause. OGL 1.0A is still revoked, and they're gonna like make VTTs illegal. Yeah. There's nothing good in this. There's no line by line. Like it's terrible. Throw it away. There's no point. None. Well, 0.
It didn't even survive a week.
I know.
That's true. The writing was on the wall when they started getting in the survey. Should I do a few more?
Let's look at a few. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so James pays for $5. Said, "I'm curious what this means for my game. It is a Fudge game under Grey Ghost. Is Orc the best option for Fudge TTRPGs?"
Yeah. So So that is actually a really, really, really interesting system. So Fudge was what I would call pseudo open, although that's kind of pejorative, and I don't mean it to be pejorative. Like early open maybe would be a better term. The guy who created Fudge, whose name is Stephen O'Sullivan, he licensed that game with a very permissive copyright license before the OGL project had even started. And that license has some challenges in it that we don't have to really get into. They're mostly about attribution and approval rights. And after the OGL came out, a person named Anne Dubois was very active in the Fudge community, and she very much wanted to get Fudge under the open gaming license. And she worked for years to convince Stephen O'Sullivan to do it. I don't really know any of those details. I wasn't a party to any of those conversations, but in the end, she was able to get that done. And there was an OGL licensed version of Fudge, and that became the foundational document that was used to create the Fate system that it's Evil Hat Productions, right? That they used for their like Spirit of the Century and a bunch of their games. And so that tree in the forest is another tree that stands separate from Dungeons and Dragons. Fate and Fudge and its family of games are their own independent role-playing game system licensed with the Open Gaming License that don't have any copyright derivative connection to Dungeons and Dragons. So it's an example of where the OGL was not a license for D&D, it is a license for games. Could that game now be licensed again under the Orc initiative? Well, of course it could, but I am not sure who would be able to do that. I don't know if Stephen O'Sullivan retains a copyright interest in Fate and Fudge and all the other underlying parts of that. He might personally have to contribute those rights to the Orc project. I don't know. It's possible that Evil Hat has those rights, or that anybody along the way may have accumulated them from someone. So it might be really easy, or it might be really hard. I don't know, but it's certainly possible.
That makes sense.
I actually want to cut the line because I saw a good question that even I answered. Is question: would you publish something for 5e today? Would you use OGL or CC? Actually, Ryan, I'm curious what you would think, because I actually have to do this because I am publishing something for 5th edition any day now, and I just have to think about that. But I'm curious of your opinion before I answer what I did.
Okay, I have a simple answer and a complicated answer. My simple answer is I would use the Open Gaming License.
Okay. It
is much more fit for the purpose of making role-playing games in an open gaming environment than the CC BY license is, for a whole host of reasons. My complicated answer is, and I'm not going to get into all the complications, if everything in my product was either derived from the CC BY content that Wizards of the Coast has released, or was my own original creation, I would use both.
Interesting.
I don't think there's any downside to licensing with both. well, I guess the downside is you're going to have to answer complicated copyright questions for the rest of all time. But licensing wise, you would be basically hedging your bets as to whether or not the community decides to switch en masse to the CTBY license or not. And the hedge is basically risk free for you, other than potentially having to answer copyright questions for 75 years.
my answer was easier. I'm still doing OGL because I already have a page in my book for OGL, and the Creative Commons is like two sentences, and I was like, oh man, I got to fill up a whole page now. I'm keeping the OGL.
That's funny. That's funny. Just slap a piece of art in there or something.
I ran out of art. I used it all up. I don't have extra art.
There's another reason to stay with OGL 1.08 potentially too, which is that if you have product identity that you want to protect, it is a little more annoying to do it with CCBY. A lot of people publish like a separate file that's in CCBY and then one that's just not in anything that includes the product identity content. And you can try to do it without doing that, but it gets a little messy. So
and we have stuff we need to protect, so it's just easier. OGL was already working for us, and I was like, I'm still working. I'm just going to keep using it.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, the CCBY license. So almost all copyright licenses are document centric. They are created by people who think of copyright as something where the atomic unit is a work. And so I'm going to license this work with this, copyright license. The problem that we have in role-playing games is that our products are very complicated mixtures of content with many different kinds of rights attached to them. And we want to allow certain parts of those works to be licensed with an open gaming philosophy. And at the same time, we either want to or are required to by our upstream licensors to protect intellectual property so that it does not become freely copyable, modifiable, and redistributable. And that's the reason the OGL exists. Like, we wrote a license that was appropriate for the kinds of complicated products that are created in the role-playing game arena. And most other copyright licenses just don't have that same level of clarity as to how you can do those things. I believe you can do that with the CCBY4 license. It can be done. It's just not as clear how to do it as it is in the OGL. And anytime you're talking about copyright and lack of clarity, what you are really talking about is the gray area where somebody gets sued, either accidentally or they just cheat and hope they don't get caught and they get sued. And that's the whole point of the open gaming movement, was to remove as much as possible the gray area so people could publish in safety.
That makes sense.
Okay, I just wanted to get that answer because I thought that was a very
that
was a great question.
Yeah.
So I'll do some more super chats. Yep. Simon Shea for $10 said, from what I hear, there's a smaller version of the OGL controversy playing out between Mongoose Publishing Cepheus and Mark Miller. Cepheus is being forced off their SRD1 to SRD2, which is a death sentence. I don't know anything about that.
Yeah, I don't know anything about that either.
I think that's unfortunate.
I
hope those guys can work it out. I've known Mark and the other guys for a long time. So I hope they can make it work.
Yeah.
So Daniel Althair sent a $1 and then a $5 super chat saying, what are the chances they add older editions to the CC license? Particularly 4E was then an example given, which is an interesting example, since the one that would be easier to add would be like 3rd edition, since it was already OGL.
I have a hard time imagining that would ever happen, mostly because it would take work on the part of somebody at Wizards to do it, and it has very little value to them. I suspect that they would like to stop talking about open game content for the next 10 years. So they probably don't want to keep reopening that wound and debating and discussing why they're doing what they're doing, although we are now in uncharted territory, so who knows what they could do. I would love for them to release the 4th edition rules as open game content using the OGL. That would be great. Like, please. But I don't know that they would ever do it.
Yeah, but I'm curious because there's that concept of law. Like, if you don't enforce your copyrights, you lose them.
That is not true. That's true for trademark.
But that is not true for trademark. Right. Actually, you're right. Yep. But my point is, if someone did release something and did a 4th edition and WotC doesn't care, how much will they really care? They think they will.
That's the gray area. You can make that gamble if you want to, but wouldn't.
Yeah.
Doesn't sound like a smart choice to me.
No, it's not a smart, but it is one of these. I have seen, but that has been done before. I mean, look, TSR, WotC let that expire, and now they're in a whole mess with that because
that's all trademark stuff, though.
Yeah, but you know what I'm getting at. It's like,
for sure.
Do people really care that much about 4th edition? I've seen that happen with other companies. Is that they own it, and then just like, we don't care, just go crazy, And
I guarantee you that there are people out there who love 4th edition, are bitter that it's not being published. They would do the old school thing that they did with 1st and 2nd edition. Like they would find a way to. Their little community, and maybe it's not little, I don't know, it could be big. Their community would coalesce and they would have support for that game. Like I'm sure that it would increase the total sum of human happiness, and therefore I am in favor of it.
There was actually a lot of excellent ideas, like Bloodied and Minions. Like there was a lot of good things from 4th edition.
I know a lot of game designers who believe 4th edition is an extremely well designed game. I would not critique it on a game design perspective at all. I think it's a great game.
I loved 4th edition we played it from level 1 to 20, and we loved it.
There are pieces I like of 4th edition, but there are pieces I didn't, and I really like the parts that I like, though.
Exactly.
In the best of all worlds, it would be licensed with the OGL, and you could mix it and match it with the parts of 3 and 3.5 and 5 that you like, the coolest hybrid imaginable.
Oh, I can make a 4.5 that would work. Like it would.
I think that would be. I mean, again, it would just increase the sum total of human happiness. So I would be in favor of that.
Makes sense. Let's see some other things. Chris G said, found this channel looking for OGL info. Really enjoyed your channel. Also enjoyed your PF2E content. Dragon's Ancestries book is amazing. Ancient Man Beast for $5 wonders, assuming 5e is a sacrificial lamb to the altar of 6e and their VTT, do you guys think that another Paizo being created for 5e is inventable?
I think
why would you create another Paizo?
Inevitable.
There is a Paizo. And if they mean a company that makes a system that's very similar to 5e, then it sounds like Black Flag is already going to do that to an extent. Level Up has done that in the past. From
Level Up did it, VN World, Black Flag.
I think multiple people are going to do it, but there's only one. Like Ryan said, there's only one Paizo, because Paizo had a very particular moment. They had very strong resources to get things out there, and it made a different response.
Yeah, I mean, Paizo was at a whole other level because they were a publisher, and then they just literally switched from magazines to books, and they had everyone in place. So that will probably never happen again.
Right. So Swartz AJ says, does this mean Tiamat and Bahamut are under CC? So Swartz AJ, do I have news for you? Tiamat is a Babylonian deity, and Bahamut is just sort of another way of saying behemoth from the Bible. So those two names already were available in the public domain. Now, whether you could say Tiamat is a 5-headed dragon because she's sort of just a not necessarily 5-headed dragon of all salt water in Sumerian and Babylonian mythology that did not have 5 differently colored heads. That goes back to Ryan's answer from before about whether the word beholder suddenly means you can republish the entire Eye Tyrant.
I'm going to do one better. I'm going to make a beholder and make it look like a mind flayer and call it Tiamat.
You know what? You'd probably be 100% in the clear on that.
Did Square Enix make a thing that like looked exactly like a beholder that was called a mind flare?
Right.
That was called a mind flare in like one of their games.
Oh, that's
They
funny.
also had a mind flare that looked like a mind flare in the original Final Fantasy. Although it was called Mind Flare with an RE because it didn't have enough
Flare.
It didn't have enough letters in the NES to fit Mind Flare, and then in later versions it put the whole thing.
Mind Flare.
Just totally confused it. They're like, "Wow, we could sue you on so many levels." I'm like, "Yeah, well, Creative Commons, baby."
There you go.
Good luck. Everyone's going to be confused out of their minds trying to even prove it. You just make it so messed up that like they can't even defend it. So
that's right.
So Harold Grundichem for 50 Norwegian krona asked, are the chance that Asmodee and Games Workshop will put their RPGs in the Orc license?
I think zero.
Games
Workshop If there was ever a moment for Games Workshop to do that, it was in the early 2000s, and they didn't. And I don't think they ever will.
And Asmodee's too big. They won't. They're like Paizo. I mean, they're like a. I don't know how big they are. They're pretty freaking big.
They're much bigger than Paizo. They own
their
like
games
no. I meant they're big. They're like
as Hasbro's games.
I meant as big as Hasbro.
Yes.
I meant not Paizo. I'm like they're pretty freaking gigantic. So
I couldn't tell you what role playing games Asmodee publishes. I'm sure they do, but I
don't know. They're always at like Gammon stuff, but I don't know what the heck
there could be some French stuff like
Yeah.
they
I
own
don't
like everything. So
I know they
if you
own.
told me that they published any
everything.
particular role playing game that they didn't used to publish, I would believe you that they had purchased that.
So there was an edition of the
they do a
Warhammer
lot.
Fantasy Roleplay game published after third edition was released, and it was designed by Chris Pramis, who was a member of the D&D design team at Wizards of the Coast, and that game is very similar to Dungeons and Dragons, and in fact, it is essentially a D20 game. It uses a D100 system, but all of the modifiers are 5% increments, which is what 1 point is on a D20. So you can play that game with D20s and it will play exactly the same as if you played with D100. They did that, but they didn't put that game under the OGL. They claimed copyright.
Mhm.
I would actually say that game is interesting in the fact that it is so close to the Dungeons and Dragons design paradigm, but did not draw a copyright infringement claim from Hasbro. That shows you how narrow the difference is between what is protectable and what is not protectable.
Mhm. Well, they do Legends of the Five Rings, Ryan. They do your baby.
They do. Yes, they do. Hopefully they do more of that.
Yeah, it's weird when
Guess
you're.
one other difference between Games Workshop and Wizards is that Wizards like made some rumbles about doing this stuff, and we had a lot of leaks showing that they were trying to do something. Games Workshop did sue, and even though losing, put a company out of business over the term Space Marines, which they lost because obviously you can't actually copyright the term Space Marine, but the company that tried to use it is gone now because they didn't survive the process.
Yep.
So Param for $2 said, "Isn't it still risky to publish under the OGL?"
No, it's not risky at all. Okay, so you can create a hypothetical where you could say, well, they said they were going to deauthorize it, and even though they didn't, they could always try again. And I guess my answer would be they would just get the exact same result or worse next time. I don't believe, I've said this from the beginning, in my opinion, they do not have the power to deauthorize that license. They do not have the power to revoke that license. They can say they do, but they do not. And so if they try it, they're probably going to get sued and they're probably going to lose.
And quite frankly, the backlash will be to the point that I don't know if Hasbro would even survive that. It would be.
I mean, now it's so awful. Like it would just be bad it was bad already, but it would be so much worse the next time they try it.
Yeah. It would just forget it.
People are gonna remember each time, and their executives come in and out like a tide, and they don't remember. But other people are there's gonna be institutional memory.
I mean, for the next,
that's right.
Yeah, for the next 3 months, basically from now until the movie, which is the end of March, and then Gamma, which is April.
Yeah,
they have to be squeaky clean. They cannot rock any boats.
Yeah.
So I expect they're not going to do anything even close to controversial until May, and then May maybe they're going to start again. But until then, I think that's the time. So
that makes sense. All right, we almost caught up here for 50,000 Costa Rican colognes. Paul Lee says Steven's reason for keeping to the OGL is the real world talking. Publishing practicalities for the win. Thanks for waging and winning the fight. Always a pleasure to listen to Stephen, Mark, and Ryan. And then lastly, Daniel Uther sent $5 and had a follow-up about the older editions. What is the best way to convince WotC to make older editions available via the CC or OGL?
Are you talking about editions before 3? Like 1 or 2
they're talking about, it's a follow-up to their question about 4th and all the ones before 5.
I believe it only happens if there's a human being inside that company who is at a high enough level who just says, I champion this and I'm going to make it happen. You can't convince the company to do anything. You have to find a human.
I think
and I don't know who that human is right now. I couldn't tell you.
Start another petition. Start another petition, just like,
Yeah. That may be a very limited
you never know.
effect.
I know.
I wouldn't use that for everything.
I know, but it worked once. You never know. But this was
look, there are some names available. There's a name attached to the decision to do the 1.2 license. We know who the head of the D&D R&D group is. There are names. You could try to communicate with those people and see what interest level they have or what power they think they have. But I mean, like Steven said, they're not going to do anything for the next several months. They're not going to. It's a live wire. They're not going to touch it.
No,
they have a pretty positive result from giving in. Why would they want to move the needle? I think.
Also, they're in hiding right now, but there's trade shows coming up soon. There's Toy Fair next month. I forgot about Toy Fair. Toy Fair's in February. Like, these people have to be there and start talking to people. And you know, I get a ticket to Toy Fair. I wonder if I can meet with the Hasbro. You know, it's like, but like, these people can't keep hiding. They're not going to be able to hide forever. And they're going to have to start answering people. So this is going to get interesting. I think I think we won right now, and I think it's going to be quiet. But I think Toy Fair is where you're going to start hearing peeps again at the end of February, and then obviously when the movie comes out, and then a Gamma, and then when the convention season starts in the summer, and when now they're going to have to start their drive for 6th edition. Like, they're going to have to start doing a lot of publicity. So they right now are they're totally hiding, but it's not going to last very long. So it's going to be fascinating to see what happens.
I think that the public campaign to pressure them into not attempting to deauthorize 1.0A is over. And now there's going to be a non-public campaign to get them to do additional things. And it would not be fair of me to talk about that, because then it would be public. But there are things going on behind the scenes trying to get them to take further steps, and we'll see if they bear fruit.
That makes sense. Andrew Meesum for $10 said, being that Hasbro invested a huge amount of money into this, what will they now do to try to become the monopoly power they wanted to be in the first place? They can't have completely capitulated.
Okay, so what does it even mean to be a monopoly in a role-playing game market? Like, what does that mean? Like, they could never stop all other role-playing games. That's impossible. They're just the most successful game on the planet, and they continue to be the most successful game on the planet. Like, we've said this before. I think we said this the last time we were all together. No part of what they were doing actually had a business value. It didn't apply. Like, there was no business value to any of it. It was all weirdly like a force, like, to show how powerful they were. They weren't going to come out of it with any meaningful new business capabilities. They were just going to come out of it maybe looking scary or something. I don't know. But obviously, I mean, the Orc Alliance formed very quickly, so that wasn't going to go away. There's a ton of role-playing games that don't use the OGL at all. Those weren't going to go away. There's a ton of people doing virtual tabletops. They're not going to stop. Like, the route forward for that company, for Wizards, is to make the best possible product, and then they will get the customers. Like, it's always been the same through line. Make a great product and you'll get lots of business.
Yep. I mean, we talked about it, and I've said it on the show before. It's like, this very strangely felt like a personal vendetta by just a small number of people and nothing more. And
it really did.
That's kind of it. And boy,
when their first move was to say there will be no royalty in the license, like, that was it. Like, you could maybe argue they thought they were going to make money from that change, but as soon as they said no royalty, well, that was it. There's no business case left.
Yeah, there really was.
Even the business case for the royalties seems pretty.
It was all control.
Pretty weird to me. If you even look at what the size of the industry, other than WotC, is reported, and even they themselves said there were only 20 people that would qualify, and you go to those 20 people, look at their margins.
Well, those are the 20 really people they thought they had to get to sign the deal. Like,
right. It was someone who I think it was.
Right.
I think it was someone who had a very strong personal vendetta against other people in the space, wanted to get rid of those people, misunderstood the space, and thought, well, if we can just get these 20 people to agree, then we're done. And that was it. Yeah. And they found out look, they were wrong.
I've been in the meetings. I've had executives make these pitches. We're going to clear the field of competition, and then we're going to be the only player left, and we're going to get all the business. And like, it just doesn't work. Like, these are not those kinds of businesses. You're not in the browser business. And I mean, that even didn't even work. There's still multiple browsers. Like the virtual tabletop business, the digital object business, you have enormous companies that are in that space that aren't going away. The guys who make Elder Scrolls Online, like they're not going to go away. The guys who, Sony, they're not going to go away. Like you're not fighting against people with $750,000 of revenue, which was the bottom of their royalty scheme. You're talking about companies that in some cases are bigger than you are. They're not going away. If they think this is a place they want to be, they're going to stay no matter what you try to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was just foolish.
Yeah. And I think we will see Fallout, not yet, but I wouldn't be surprised if we start seeing some people losing their jobs.
It feels inevitable to me.
Yeah.
But we'll see.
We'll see. So we're about to finish the super chats. So Shadowy Insights. We're not?
No,
I see 2 more.
Keep going. They're going to keep coming. They never stop. It's like
finish them for now, Steven. Temporarily catch up. We're not stopping people from putting them in. I mean, we're about to finish with the ones that are currently
more
active.
Coming in.
There's another one. There's
you
2
said
more
to stop, and
people.
everyone's flying in. Here come the
People
They're coming
me.
fast
I
and
meant
furious.
we were going to catch up.
I
but we're not.
I know.
So I see a biblically accurate angel on the background. Said Shadowy Insight for $5. Is this a creature you're publishing? Where can I get it? It's one of the Eldamon in Battle Zoo Eldamon. You can go to battlezoo.com and get Battle Zoo Eldamon. It's one of the fire Eldamon. It's a wheel of flame, like the Ophanim from the Bible. Daniel Other, another follow-up on that 4E OGL thing for $5, says, to everyone watching this who cares, start making the case politely and respectfully to open up 4E and pre-WotC editions. Then, after Steven mentioned for more super chats, we did get a flurry of 3 more. Goofy Geek for $10 said, I worry WotC ultimately won. 6E's biggest competition was 5E. Now it's in shambles, meaning 6E is free to show up. Have anyone missing 5E try it and return. If 5E is dead, did they win? I don't think you ever win by anything that hurt you while you still have books that are coming out at the end of the edition cycle. There's no reason. I think it's a self-inflicted wound, not some kind of 5-dimensional chess.
No, I agree. It isn't. Yeah.
I think you missed Eric S. Riley's $5 super chat.
Oh, you're right. I totally missed it in there. Eric S. Riley said, for $5, should WotC divest themselves of the OGL and turn it over to a neutral third party?
I would say yes. Can't hurt.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah.
Then Nodoak Dozier said, takes effort to create an SRD. SRD 3 exists, but an SRD 1 and 2 did not. Very little effort to dual license SRD 3 under CC, which should be a PR win. So... and then trails off with a ...
Yeah, it's not that it's hard. It's that it's time consuming, and it continues to put the thing back in the news cycle. Like Wizards of the Coast doesn't want a news article out this week saying Wizards backs down even more. Not good. Not a good look.
Well, there's no such thing as bad press.
Move on.
I always say that there's no such thing as bad press, but I'd say this was pretty bad press. This was pretty bad.
Yeah, it was bad.
It was bad.
Yeah.
You could have bad press. This is the exception that proves the rule.
This is the exception. It's yeah.
Okay, so actually catching up. Shan Wolf for $5 says, is the Orcs talks doing well? I'm worried there are too many cooks kind of situation.
I actually don't know. I'm in contact with those guys, and I told them that until there was a resolution on this question of deauthorization, I was not going to spend any time working on anything beyond that point. So now we've got that point cleared up, and I have time to talk to them about what their future is going to be. I don't sense that there's any lack of momentum there. I think they are going to be moving forward fairly rapidly with their plan, and I think that they have a shame me once, fool me once, shame on me kind of thing going on. They are not going to wait around for the next Wizards of the Coast executive to decide he can kill their business. So they're probably committed to a forward path no matter what. What does that path look like? I think there's a huge branching future of options. Like it could be anything. Nobody knows. They're going to work on it.
I know they're working on it. I mean, I'm talking to some of those same people, and I know they're hard at work and trying to get that out fast. So, but correctly,
it took 6 months or so of work on the OGL before we got it bashed into a place where I was pretty happy with it.
Oh yeah, I don't
things,
expect
they
this
should not be done quickly.
I don't think it's going to be done anytime sooner than Gen Con, but I think they're going to have the outline by the beginning of March ready for comments. That seems reasonable to me.
Yeah, that's a pretty good pace of work.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. So, no, look at that. We caught up to super chats, but we can still chat. We got plenty of things to talk about.
There are a lot of people saying interesting things, and plus
I'm sure to talk about.
I'm sure we have more subtopics without super chats.
I mean, I'm curious. What did you think? How did you think this was going to play out, Ryan? Like in your mind before last week?
Yeah.
What was your take? Did you think they were just going to wait and then go through it and give another version and was going to just keep going, or what did you even think they were going to try to do?
I thought they were going to move very quickly to a formal deauthorization of 1.0a. If I was running that show and for some reason I was committed to the idea they had to do this, I would have actually just done that. I would have deauthorized that license, and then that would have created pressure on everybody to move to the new license. And like I was telling you guys before the show began, I spent the last week unable to sleep, tossing and turning, trying to convince myself that I didn't have to form a legal defense fund and sue them, which I probably maybe would have had to do if they had deauthorized, because I'm not 100% sure that there's anybody else in the space that would have been able or willing to take on that burden for essentially no benefit. So I'm super glad. I cannot tell you how relieved I am that I don't have to be doing that. I have no interest in that. Like as we talked about last time, that's not my job. I don't publish role-playing games. I'm not in that space. It has nothing to do with what I do for a living. It would be nothing but a distraction and a negative for me and my company. So I am super glad I am off the hook on that one. I think that they would have continued to bleed in the way they were bleeding, and that there would have been story after story after story about what they were doing and how bad it was. When they're kind of in the C-level media like NPR and The Guardian and things, that's one thing. But when the Wall Street Journal starts writing articles about stuff, and when it gets on the national news, it's just bad. So, and that's what was going to happen. Like, that's how these things occur. They start at a lower level, and then the media kind of works its way up until it's at a very high level. Weirdly, and sadly, a saving grace for them is that the Washington Post disbanded the launcher team right after the launcher team published a big article about the OGL. Really unfortunate for the launcher people, but good for Hasbro. But I mean, I can only imagine the experience they would have had. They go into Gamma, and they've got a bunch of retailers at their seminar asking question after question after question about why they're hurting their business, and why are they doing these things that are causing these other products not to sell. Like you said, they go to Toy Fair, they're going to have the big toy buyers asking, like, how is this going to affect Transformers? How is this going to affect G.I. Joe?
Oh yeah,
like, it is all bad. It was just going to be bleeding and bleeding and bleeding and bleeding and bleeding. So I kind of felt like at some point they were going to have to stop that bleeding, but how they stopped it, I think, is hard to imagine. Yeah, and they were in a bad place. I tried to tell them, like, it's so bad, it isn't going to get better. It's just bad.
And Toy Fair, which probably very few people have experienced, and they've probably heard of it. Toy Fair is really interesting. I used to joke, I would go to Toy Fair, I would wear khakis and a polo shirt. And if I wore that at like Gen Con or, any gaming convention, I'd be like the most dressed person there. I would wear that to Toy Fair, and I was like the sloppiest person there, because everyone there is in suits and ties. Like, it is incredibly professional.
Very East Coast.
Yeah, it's very East Coast. It's very professional. Like, they ain't fooling around. They're there to wheel and deal. And they're going to be asking. They're not going to be like, oh, what's going on with this OGL? They will be in Wizard's face saying, what are you doing? You're messing up our business. Why should I order from you? Like, they're going to be right in their face asking this.
I'm sure there were people sitting down in the marketing department at Paramount just tearing their hair out. Like, I mean, just think about Chris Pine. I mean, that guy has gone through a whole bunch of movies that were kind of fizzles, not due to anything that was his fault. He and his representation were probably just climbing the walls over this. Like, we committed an A-list actor to this franchise. I'm sure he signed to a 5, 6, 7 picture deal.
I think he's getting like 10 million too. I mean, it's
right?
like, yeah.
And then this crazy thing happens that has no business purpose at all. right before the movie comes out. Oh my God.
Yeah. Oh, I guarantee
so
Paramount probably had like literally a one-on-one with Williams and was like,
with Chris Cox,
yeah,
the
Chris
CEO
Cox,
of Hasbro. They're not talking to Williams. They're
they're talking
Cox.
right. They're talking to Chris Cox, and there's like, get your house in order now.
Yes. I am aware of some private equity people who own hundreds of millions of dollars of Hasbro stock who are looped in on this issue and were extremely concerned about the value of their portfolio.
Oh, yeah.
And those are the phone calls you do not want to get when you're the CEO of a publicly traded company. That's how you lose your job, when you're the CEO of a publicly traded company.
Yeah, no, I guarantee.
Over this thing that's meaningless.
Oh, Alta Fox, I guarantee, was calling them up because they own 2.5%.
I mean, can you imagine you're Chris Cox and you're dealing with big time issues, massive pandemic disruptions, manufacturing, China's chaos, the world is on fire, and all of a sudden these yahoos out in Renton blow the world up? I mean, I can't. And there used to be your yahoos. Chris Cox was the head of Wizards of the Coast. Like,
I know.
I can't even imagine how stressful the last 2 weeks have been for those people. And just, I'm sure they're just wondering, like, what happened? What is going on?
Well, you know what? Someone mentioned this. It's South by Southwest on March 13th at 11:30 a.m. There's a panel, Dungeons, Dragons, and Development Across the Decades, and Chris Cow from Wizards of the Coast is going to be there. Might be a fun session to go to.
I'm tempted to fly down to Austin and sit on that
I know.
panel.
I'm looking at this. Actually, it's pretty good. I was like, oh, Chris Cow's going to be there. Nathan Stewart from Wizards of the Coast. We got 2 people from Entertainment One. Ooh, this might be.
Entertainment One. That's the production company.
That's the production company,
movie, right?
which they bought for $4 billion in cash that they're now trying to sell because they need the money. Like, yeah. That might be a very interesting panel.
That's a tough panel to be on, right there.
I have a feeling a lot of those people calling in sick and might just be a slideshow or something.
It'll be interesting to see if that panel happens. That'll be a bookmark. I'll keep an eye on them.
Feeling that panel's not happening.
I tend to agree with you. We'll see.
Yeah, I wouldn't buy those tickets yet because I think you're going to be going and it's going to be like this panel is closed. So I was like, I had a feeling.
So let's see. We got a few more super chats coming in. Matt Sherwin for $5 said 5e is WotC's new Coke. Rocking Donkey for $5 said, here's another super chat just so you won't be caught up because I'm just that way.
Rocking Donkey, rocking the super chat.
Look, 5th edition is not their new Coke. 5th edition is a wildly successful product. No. It has multiplied the D&D business by some enormous margin. I mean, look, this little kerfluffle in our little corner of the industry, 98% of the people who play D&D have no idea there was ever an issue, nor did they ever care. So most of the people that are going to buy D&D in the next 6 months to a year, they're not going to be affected by this at all. And the people that are watching, live play online, they're going to keep watching. And those weekly gaming groups are going to go right on being weekly gaming. Like, this is a big deal to a bunch of people, but a nothing deal to an enormous number of people.
Absolutely.
I don't think
5e is the biggest explosion of growth for the game that it's really had, except for, I guess, at the beginning when it went from nothing to...
I mean, I'm sure that having lots of stories about Dungeons and Dragons in the media has got a bunch of people to play D&D. I'm sure. They weren't good stories, but they got people interested in the brand.
Maybe.
I guess they hear at the end that they backed down, so at least it had a happy ending.
Right.
But see, I don't think someone else brought this up, and I was like, I don't think 5e is the new Coke. I can't think the OGL was the new Coke, but people, and as someone who was alive when that occurred, people don't remember the outcome was that Coca-Cola ended up stronger than ever because of that. So
classic. That's right.
That's right. That ended up being one of the biggest mistakes of all time, but they managed to also turn into one of the biggest pivots of all time. So
Daniel out there thinks that would make New Coke 4e because it pivoted into 5e, which then became a huge game.
I think that's a true assessment. I really do.
Mm-hmm.
I do. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I think we said this the last time the three of us were together. 4e is like the ultimate fantasy heartbreaker. It's just like D&D, except it isn't.
Yeah, it's a lot like New Coke, I guess, because New Coke, they tried to test it, and it seemed like it was going to do well. It had all the components of something that would do well, but then it didn't.
Right. Yeah. So New Coke and 4th edition do share a lot of similarities. So New Coke existed because of the Pepsi challenge. Steve and I are old enough to remember the Pepsi challenge. You would go to a supermarket and there'd be a nice dressed young lady there with 2 little Dixie cups of cola, and you would drink them, and then you would tell them which one you like better. And people always pick Pepsi because Pepsi has a higher sugar content or tasted more sweet than Coke. And in a blind taste test with one sip, people would pick the sweeter drink. So they had this massive amount of data about Coke and Pepsi, and the Coke executives basically said, we need to change the formula. We need to compete with Pepsi. We need to stop losing the Pepsi challenge. And I think 4th edition is that comparison between tabletop role playing and MMOs. And if you just sit somebody down and say, you have 5 minutes to experience these 2 gameplay patterns, which do you prefer? People will pick an MMO every time. It's vastly more easy to play. There's many more people to play it with. You can play anytime. There's a ton of advantages, right? But it isn't directly comparable in the way that Coke and Pepsi were not truly directly comparable because they're lifestyle brands, and people are D&D players and they want to play D&D. They don't want to play a game that's just like D&D except it isn't. So it's very, the new Coke 4th edition analysis I think is very strong.
That makes sense.
I can give you, Ryan Dancey, a little bit even more insight into this if you're curious.
Oh, yeah? Were you a part of the Cola Wars?
Oh, I definitely was. I was a Cola warrior. But I'm talking about the... No, I'm talking about the 4th edition, because back then, I actually was pretty friendly with Chris Perkins, and the person I used to go see Chris with was John Statz, who was the first 3D level designer for World of Warcraft ever. Oh, okay. And he plays with us still. And we went to the D&D experience back in Washington, D.C. Remember that, when they used to do that? And it was actually on Chris Perkins' birthday, which is December 29th. So he was turning, I think, 10 that year. And he and I and John sat down, and he went on to explain how they made 4th edition based off World of Warcraft, and based not only that, because back then, not only was World of Warcraft like totally exploding back in the early 2000s, but so were their computer games, and it was very hard for them to convert 3rd edition to a computer game. It was very easy for 2nd, because 2nd was very modular. So they wanted to make it more modular and easier for the programmers. So they thought that was going to continue like down the path of the Baldur's Gates and stuff. And so that's why they went that way. And plus they were also just huge fans of World of Warcraft. And me and John and Chris would talk about this forever. And the rest is history. Like,
I mean, look, the role-playing game market as a whole was not healthy in the mid-2000s. It was almost as sick as it was at the end of the 90s. Right. And my analysis at the time, and I believe this to be true today, is the problem was MMOs. The problem with MMOs is that in order to play a tabletop role-playing game, you have to have a game master. So you could have a group of 4 people that love to play the game, and if one of them decides to quit, and that one person is the game master, the whole game falls apart. And World of Warcraft and the MMOs were destroying the social network of tabletop role-playing because they were getting people to leave the tabletop and go to the digital world. And if the person who left was the game master, the whole group fell apart. And so they were in bad shape for a long time. And frankly, I got to say, the fact that D&D had a renaissance and that role-playing games came roaring back, it is shocking to me because MMOs did nothing but get better over time. But, the MMO business is a lot smaller than it was in the 90s. There is a lot fewer people playing MMOs today than there used to be, which I would have never predicted that. But that's the truth.
Cuddly Zombies. By the way, because a lot of people say, oh, that's not true. That's not true. There's like people who say, 4th edition was not based on MMOs. That's rumor. I'm like, it's not rumor. B, I was there. C, I've talked to Chris Perkins many times. And D, if you want secondary evidence, John Statz is on my show and my good friend, and you can ask him. He was there with us. And by the way, Chris Beamer and Seth Lipton, who are also on the show, they were there too. So I have 3 people who can confirm these conversations took place.
You'll see primary quotes that claim that it wasn't. You will. But I've also heard from people who are on the 4E team that, like, for example, in the design, that one of the things that went towards like the daily, the at will and the encounter powers being standardized in a particular way so you could learn it was the way that like the Xbox controller, like in so many different action games, I can't remember which buttons were which now, but there's maybe the Y is always like a heavy attack and X is just like for your basic attack and A is a dodge roll or something like that. And people learned it across multiple games and not made by the same people. even. And it made it so that it was easier to get into games. And so the thought was, if you have a move set, not exactly the same as that, of course, but that was like that in terms of looking at it and learning it, it would make it easier to learn and understand the game. So that was another example that people who I talked to who were literally there when they were making 4E said that some of the upper people in the design were thinking about the way video games do things
definitely.
Psychologically.
100%. And on top of that, people don't remember. I mean, we do, like, in the early 2000s, MMOs were taking over the world. Like, it was
10 million people were playing World of Warcraft.
No, it went up to 13. It went up to 13 million. Like, it took over the world. And then you have EverQuest, and you have Asheron's Call, and you had a million others, and everyone was making an MMO, and that's all people were doing is playing MMOs, and that's it.
So, it was amazing. It was the fact
great.
that turned around and changed, and it didn't turn around and change because of anything that was done by Wizards of the Coast or any other tabletop game publisher. Like, I can't explain it. People just decided to change the way they played games.
It was something. Yeah, it was just something like when WoW came out. Like, EverQuest came out, and EverQuest was pretty amazing, but it still was very rough. And then when WoW came out,
that's right.
There were people, and I was part of it, and it's like they could not stop playing. Like, it was like an addiction. Like, they couldn't stop.
It is. It's not like an addiction.
It still is.
It pushes all of the buttons in the human brain that an addiction pattern pushes.
It was it was like people just, that's all they did. That's all they played. You know, you couldn't get them to play even Magic. You couldn't get them to play board games. Like, they would play, they just do it every day for hours. Oh, man. And it was like, I don't know how we broke out of that. And it's kind of amazing. I guess we have many other addiction machines like Twitter and YouTube and TikTok that work. But,
it's funny. I do think that was part of it. I think the live play, actual play, video streaming is part of the reason why things turned around. I think the fact that 2 million people a week are watching those guys on Critical Role play a role-playing game has something to do with the fact that the role-playing game business came roaring back.
Oh, I guarantee it is.
It's just not that much fun to watch somebody play World of Warcraft, but it's pretty cool to watch 5 talented, beautiful people play a role-playing game.
Oh, definitely. You watch them and they're fun. It's because there's a reason why professional improv is so interesting and so good. And you basically, this is like professionally scripted, loosely scripted improv, and very, very entertaining. Like, it's like, no kidding. So
it creates aspirational, like, I want to be like that. Like, now I've got a mental image of what my game group could be like. I want that to happen. I'd love to be a part of that. That's really powerful. And to their credit, like, Wizards jumped on that ball really, really, really early. Somebody inside that company had that insight and was like, this is a game changer. We need to be a part of this. Kudos to them. They poured a lot of money into it. They made a lot of effort in that space, and it definitely paid off.
Stranger Things helped too.
Well,
exactly. Another thing, right? The nostalgia pull. Yeah.
It was a lot of timing. I mean, Stranger Things, you can't underestimate, because at the time that was, until very recently, the most popular streaming show in the history of the world. So it's pretty popular. We got a whole bunch of new ones.
More super chats.
A whole bunch of new ones.
Yep, we've got some more coming in. So Mr. Smith's government class for $10 said, look down, don't look it in the eye. Look down, roll a save or petrify. My con is strong, no way I'll fail my throw. Look down, there's 20 rounds to go. Then
that's how you fight the beholder?
Yeah, I guess so.
Don't look up.
That's right.
Don't look into the eye.
I like that.
Ollie Wright for €6 said, I'm curious what Ryan thinks of WotC's VTT walled garden micropayments plan, especially if a fully 3D engine will end up too much like a video game.
Okay, as a business person, if I were tasked with making a lot of money from Dungeons and Dragons, I would do a VTT with a walled garden and a microtransaction system. Like, it's just obvious. If you make it really good and people really like playing it, they will happily pay you. And there are plenty of businesses in that space. It's a proven business model. Like, you're not inventing the wheel here at all. There is an intersection of tabletop role-playing gaming with digital assistance, which is a threshold that I have been predicting that the hobby would cross at some point in the past 20 years. And it has not really ever crossed it, but we may finally be getting close to that crossing point. I have always believed that D&D would be a lot more fun if a substantial part of the load of the dungeon master were taken off their shoulders and were handled by an AI. Playing the monsters is really, really hard. All you want to do as the DM is set up the encounter and do the funny voices and, make the world come alive for your players. Let somebody else figure out how to make that monster move around the battle space and use its effects, to the best of its ability. I kind of feel in some ways that's one of the reasons that Gloomhaven is so successful. The AI, although it's not a digital AI, it's a paper AI. It does a great job of taking that load off of the players and, letting somebody else do it.
Yeah.
There's a rules complexity problem. So 3.0 is a complicated game. I think 3.5 is too complex. I think 3.75, which is what I would call Pathfinder, is even more complicated. And it reduces the number of people that can comfortably play those games. Making a role-playing game less complicated for the players is good, in my opinion. At the same time, if you have a computer involved, you could have much more complicated game systems that don't add any significant load to the players. You could have a weather system. You could take gravity into account. Like there's a bunch of stuff that you just don't want to do in the tabletop. But if you had a computer involved, it would be great. And I think now we have things like Chat GPT and Stable Diffusion. It's becoming clearer what the path is to having pretty cool assistants so that a human DM can express themselves and build the world they've always wanted to build without having to have, this enormous load placed on their shoulders. Clearly, people like to play games on the tabletop. I think that a pure virtual tabletop world is never going to happen. People are always going to want to get together and sit around a table and play a game with one another. So I don't think that there's ever a point where the VTT becomes so good that physical tabletop just goes away. I just don't see that ever happening. But I could see a world where the VTT was a different and in some ways richer and more fun experience than the tabletop.
Let me ask you. I have a question for you, Ryan, and a follow-up of my opinion. So I play a lot of board games, and I 100,000% agree with you. Just 100,000%. That board games, a little bit, but board games have gotten to the point where it can take me a good hour to just set it up, and it's very slow because these board games have gotten so complex. And by going online, and now I've been playing most of them online, they're designed to be played online. They're still a ton of fun, and there's so much automation that I can just concentrate on playing it and not have to worry about getting there. And literally with Gloomhaven, I had to get there an hour early just to freaking set it up because it's so many pieces and it weighs 35 pounds. And that, like, I 100% agree with you. Now, my question for you is, are you upset? And I've had other very high up people, developers, feel what bothers them the most is D&D is going to turn into a video game, and it is not going to be D&D anymore. D&D is being used as a brand to turn to something it's not. And what is your opinion on that? Do you think that's true? Do you have any feelings on that? If it suddenly D&D turns into more of an, a video game type product, not really a VTT, where you say that I don't think there's going to be AI yet. Everyone's like, oh, there's going to be AI DMs. That's impossible. I'm like, no. From what I understand, it's not going to be AI DMs, but there's going to be scripted adventures, and that they've been doing for 30 years. That's very easy to do. There's a difference between a scripted adventure and an AI DM. I think they're going to start off with scripted adventures and eventually go to AI DMs.
So you could right now, if you have a Chat GPT account, you could go to Chat GPT and you could type in a prompt that was something like, design a cool adventure, or design a cool encounter with a couple of orcs, a bugbear, and a hobgoblin shaman. And it would probably spit out some fairly useful thing. It probably doesn't have game stats, but it would produce text that was close enough to a game that you could probably stat it up and play that encounter.
Yeah,
we are not that far away from going into a virtual world and saying, make me an encounter with a couple of orcs and some bugbears and a hobgoblin chieftain, and it would do everything. It would make the room. It would do all the lighting.
Yes.
It would the cool holy unholy symbols. All of the monsters would have their own unique personalities. It would probably generate a script for the shaman to be screaming at the players.
Yep.
Is that an AI DM?
I mean,
like,
it's sort of,
I came up with the idea. Somebody else just kind of filled in the blanks.
But that's no different
Ron
than
Lundin
Diablo.
on his, he's one of the senior designers at Wizards. On his own personal blog, Run Amok Games had ChatGPT come up with an adventure, and
I saw that.
just like on its own. He gave it some follow-up questions sometimes when he thought it didn't give enough information, but his pitch was that he put the adventure out there first, and then later he said, "Oh, and by the way, I had an AI do this and
do it all."
thing, just so you know,
we are at the
Reddit.
We are at the very beginning of what futurists call the accelerando. The accelerando is the period of time where AI stops being a novelty and becomes a part of our daily lives. And it is an exponential phenomenon. And human brains are extremely bad at dealing with exponential phenomenon. So it will feel like there was nothing and then it was everywhere. Right. But if you're paying attention along the way, you will notice the accelerando occurring. And the accelerando has started. We are in it right now. So we're not that far away from that stuff. Now, I think, Stephen, your original question was what I feel bad about that. That's a difficult question for me to answer. I'm a child of the 70s. I first played Dungeons and Dragons when I was in the 12th grade. Sorry, when I was 12 years old, when I was in the 6th grade.
How old are you?
When I was a 6th grader, when I was 12 years old. And it was a game you played on graph paper. My first character sheet has got like 10 things written on it, right? Some ability scores, a 10-foot pole, a saving throw, a sword and some armor. That's it.
Right.
So the imagination that you had to pour into the game was everything. There was nothing. Like when I started playing, there wasn't even box text and adventures you were supposed to read to the players. Nope. You had to make everything up. So it's hard for me to imagine what it would be like to be 12 years old and encountering the idea of a role-playing game today. Would I have as much love and fun with that hobby as I have had over the past 40 years? Like I think so, but I'm not 12. So I don't know. I don't know what a 12-year-old is going to think is cool. Are we the last generation of people that are going to want to engage in this particular expression of role-playing? I mean, that's possible. Would that make me sad? Yeah, I'd be sad. But also, I think it would be because something even better came along that millions of people were enjoying as much as I enjoyed playing a game with graph paper and a really simple character sheet. So I'm not going to stand in the way of progress. I think everybody has to find, entertainment and glory in the hobby in their own way. And there is no bad way to play a role-playing game. So
I think what's interesting is that most technologies and everything evolves. Okay. If you are, I'm a sports fan, and as someone who's been around, like I've seen, although baseball's barely evolved, but you have things like hockey. Hockey's evolved a lot in the last 50 years. Football's evolved a lot, and so has basketball. Like these sports, you literally have seen new rules and new ways to play it change in my lifetime. But the funny thing about games like Dungeons and Dragons, they have not changed. Like the way you play D&D, 50 years ago and you play today, yes, the books are a lot nicer and you have a lot more details and they're full color and you got tokens and it's gorgeous. But really, you're kind of still just playing it the exact same way. But we're about to see, as you said, there's going to be a huge shift of not just playing D&D, but how you play D&D with maybe this new VTT and virtual AIs being the DMs. And I think a lot of people are going to have to come to grips of like, wow, this game is now going to change and there's going to be a before and after. And we're all going to be on the before. And that's going to be weird.
The thing I don't really believe in is the metaverse. I don't think people are going to strap a helmet to their head and, be in a virtual reality. I just don't buy it. I don't believe it's going to happen.
Really?
I could be totally wrong about that.
Really?
I mean, billions of dollars are being bet.
I got
I'm
my
wrong.
sword right here. Look, I can strap on my helmet and start swinging this thing around and knock over everything. And
is that Black Razor?
Yes,
that's super cool.
It's Black Razor. How cool is that?
That is super cool.
I know. It's
right
my Black Razor. My favorite.
I'm super skeptical.
My dog didn't like
I'm
Black
old enough to
Razor.
have been down the VR path 3 times, right? And I am just super skeptical. I think AR, augmented reality, is very likely. But I think VR, virtual reality, I just don't buy it. Not with head-mounted displays, and I just don't buy it. Maybe some kind of direct brain interface, maybe, but not with monitors in front of your head.
I hate those. I think it's going to be contact lenses or which they're getting close with those because they're using them. It always starts in the military. That's where things always start. And they're starting
military or porn, one of the two.
Well, they're usually both. 100%. People think we're joking. 100% true. They are starting to experiment with AI image assisted contact lenses for military use.
Yep.
And that is where we will get the AR, the VR coming from. So it's that's what we say. I see that coming. But that's going to be a while. That's going to be another 20 years.
The technology, the engineering will advance a lot slower than the software capability in those cases.
Yeah.
A lot slower. They're on different tracks.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Should I do a few more super chats?
Let's keep going.
All right, so I'm going to skip to one from Zabiv because it was boosting non-super chats, and I have them right now. From Scott Kurtz, who pointed out that not for nothing, but that Scott Kurtz and Acquisitions Incorporated started before Critical Role, were paid to do so by WotC to promote 4th edition specifically because of the backlash by the community, and did so for 10 years, like up on the stage at the Paramount Theater in front of thousands of people more than once, streamed to movie theaters. So, like, pointing out that there was the Critical Role is not the first that did that.
Sure.
Then there is
Bento Kitty.
Yes, I'm going back now. I went to that one just because it involved a thing that was already in our chats. Gweno Kitty for 10 Canadian dollars said, "How scary to WotC really was the alleged 40K plus D&D Beyond cancellations with a user base in the millions? How scary was Paizo's Pathfinder and Cosm's Call of Cthulhu selling out to WotC Orc United?" I feel like just because they have a user base in the millions does not mean that all of those people had a paid subscription.
Actually, let me answer this, and you think you chime in, Ryan. So what I've heard is there's supposedly the mailing list for D&D Beyond is 13 million people. So we'll say 1 million people subscribe to D&D Beyond.
Yeah, that seems like a rational number to me.
It's not 1 million. Let's just say 1 million. We'll just say that, though. It's not.
It's an overestimate.
Okay, you know what? Let's be real. Say 500,000. Okay. 500,000, maybe. And the numbers have been around 40 to 50,000 people canceled their subscriptions. That's 10% in
That's a
week.
big signal.
And these are not only in a week
or two.
Yeah. And these are not just people canceled. These are the heavy users. These are the whales. Yeah. These are the people who's had accounts for years that they will never get back or rarely get back. Yeah. So these were like the worst people to lose. These weren't the churn. This was their people they expected will never leave. Yeah. So do you think it had a bit of a incentive for them to do something?
Yeah, I think it was a big effect.
Yeah.
I also think that the huge drop in their stock price when they announced they were laying off 15% of their staff had a huge effect. And those two things aren't connected. Like, they weren't laying that staff off because of the D&D Beyond thing, but they happened at the same time.
Yeah.
Like, that point of maximum pressure.
I guarantee they're laid off their staff, and why everyone else does it is because they're trying to make their quarterly numbers. That's all.
I don't think that the Orc initiative had any short-term effect. I don't think anything that Paizo was doing had any short-term effect. No. It was going to have a long-term effect, but in the short term, I don't think it was going to have any effect. If anything, it was just they were going to have to finalize their plan on whether to sue them or not. That was probably the only short-term effect.
Well, I guarantee by losing, if they lost 10% of their, D&D subscriptions, all their models just had to go. They just had to move all their models down, and suddenly it's taking them a lot longer to make back their money, and that affects everyone.
That's exactly right. 100%.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, small change in initial conditions results in enormous changes at the tail end of the projection. The terminal valuation might have dropped by $1 billion because they lost 50,000 people.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Because the costs are always going to be the same, and so it's you need a certain number of people where it turns into like pure profit.
Yeah. It was really, 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 really bad.
It was so bad.
It was really bad.
It feels so easy to say that now when we win, but man, was it bad.
It was, they have no idea. It's like, I know people are like, oh, how bad could it be? I'm like, I would love to be in those meetings because those people must be screaming.
I would love to be there. I don't like to see people that like have to be that anxious.
I'm 100%. No, I get it. But they just blew out their numbers. They probably just added 3 to 5 years to get back their money, like wherever they were. Like it's bad. Like that's a lot of subs.
on the upside, I think it was great for Paizo. I think they sold a ton of product.
They sold that.
There's a lot of other companies in that same boat. Monty Cook, they sold a bunch of stuff. Like, it was great.
Everyone is sold out.
Paizo sold really it 16 times their pace. They had just reprinted the core rulebook for an 8-month run, and they sold it in 2 weeks.
Well, between you and me,
it's fantastic.
Between you and me and no one else. Is anyone else looking? Is anyone else here? I was talking to Eric Mona, and he's like, after this first started, he's like, well, we sold out of all of our suppliers' copies, but we're still okay. We still got stuff in the warehouse. And then the next week he's like, well, we're out of everything.
It's gone.
it was like we're out of the warehouse too. It's like we just ran out. We're like, we don't have anything left. I was like, okay. So
one of the coolest things about their business is they are out of physical books, but they can still sell the PDFs.
Correct.
So even though there's going to be a supply shortage because they just don't have the books in the warehouse, their business doesn't have to necessarily have a slowdown.
Correct.
So they're in a really good position.
Yeah, but he didn't expect. They never sell out of the warehouse. That never happens.
Yeah,
ever.
no, it does not. I spent a lot of time in that warehouse, and it does not sell out.
Yeah, they sold out
because they always plan to restock it before they run out, and they know what the pace is going to be.
Yeah, and book sales are really predictable. There aren't a lot of surprises. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, absolutely.
And then there's a surprise. Yeah,
it's a good surprise though. 16 times. That's awesome.
That's right.
Jay Grubbs 34 for $5 said, making fighting style video game, you only have a fraction of the players who play those games. D&D 99% of tabletop RPG base interest. How damaged is that now? I don't know that they necessarily broke the fact that it's the big name that everybody's heard of from this. It just sort of made it so that people are now looking at a few more different RPGs, but probably still at D&D. And even then it's a small number, I think. It's just that if 1% of all of D&D people start looking at your small indie game, that probably means that your small indie game may have just gotten 3 times as many people as it's ever had.
Yeah, that's right. And I'll tell you, the smart companies, and a lot of these companies are smart. I know the people who run them; they're brilliant people. They get that fact that they have been given a gift, and they're going to do the best job they can to keep and hold these new people that are going to come in and experience their world. Right? They're going to view this as a once in a business lifetime opportunity to grow, just because it happened. Like they're going to try to keep you interested and focused on your new thing. So it's going to be a cool time to be a part of any of those communities for the next 6 months or so. You're just going to get a lot of love. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a discussion event.
Speaking of which, if you want to get the Battle Zoo Ancestry's Year of Monsters PDF only edition for only $50, you get 13 PDFs, a 200-page book at the end of the year, over 250 digital assets to use in anything you want, and Pathfinder 2e. You got to sign up now because that's ending any day now, maybe even tomorrow.
Possibly tomorrow. So,
yeah, probably tomorrow.
Do you want to put the link in the chat?
Can you put the link in? I can't seem to find the link.
I can put the link in the chat.
Thank
you. No problem. Let me get that for you.
Brian took the words right out of my mouth. You gotta get people interested. Hey man,
get that plug in.
Yeah, man. You got slimes and doppelgangers might be coming as soon as tomorrow.
This is the link that I just put into the chat, and you might get doppelgangers tomorrow. That would be super awesome.
You can be a doppelganger.
There's 10 more. There's one coming every month.
We got intelligent weapons, Ryan. You can play a freaking intelligent way. You can play Stormbringer. Can you imagine?
Yeah, it'd be great.
I know.
Yeah, it's hilarious. So let's see. The next thing that people said was Ollie Wright for €2. Owlcat have shown that 3rd edition can make a great video game. And
boy, that's true. I'll tell you what, I have spent over 450 hours playing Wrath of the Righteous.
No, are you one of those?
It is fantastic.
There's a couple of people like that. There's a people when they get into it and they're like, how many hours you have? You're like, 500. I was like, there's a few of those out there.
It's fantastic.
It is. I love those games. I can't get into it because it's almost too overwhelming. I was like, okay, guys, you didn't have to put all the rules into your game.
Every single class. Yeah, it's nuts.
It's like you could have put some of the rules. You didn't have to say if it's a rule, we have to put it in there. I'm like, dude, you went too far.
I'll tell you a funny story. So shortly after I took over the D&D business at Wizards, which would have been this either happened late in 1998 or early in 1999. We were really struggling on revenue because the business was just in a terrible place. And there were a lot of questions about the quality of the decisions that had led up to Wizards buying TSR in the first place. And I got a phone call from the guys who did the licensing upstairs, and they said, "Hey, we just got a check from Interplay for the Baldur's Gate game. Do you know anything about that?" And I said, "Yeah, I mean, I know about it. I know they're doing a game, and the deal was done, at TSR, and I haven't played it yet. I think it's going to be pretty cool, but what's the story?" And they said, "Well, the check is for $8 million."
Wow.
And all of my financial problems went away.
By the way, Shadowfang asked, will Battlezoo ever be on Roll20? Yeah, it's all on Roll20 now. just search for it. Just search for Battlezoo. It's all there. Or Roll for Combat. It's all
Easy
there.
answer.
That was
There you
easy.
go.
There you go. Yeah.
Daniel Othair for $5 said, it's incredibly ironic that Chris Cow's vision for the future of D&D is literally just a 4E model with a system that isn't suited for it.
That may be a good analysis.
Grendel Mraz for $10 said, is WotC's on its own island analogy from earlier equivalent to the tabletop RPG community saying we don't know them when asked about WotC? I'm not sure what that means.
Don't understand that. Yeah.
For €2, Ollie Wright said Dark Age of Camelot had better PvP than WoW as an MMO fact.
Oh, I love
cool,
Dark
dude.
Age. I love Dark
Cool,
Age.
dude.
I played a lot of Dark Age.
And back in the MMO times, we've had a few. Sickle5 said, not sure if this is why MMOs died and tabletops RPGs took off. As someone in my 20s, MMOs turned me off growing up because of sub fees. So when college came around, we resorted to RPGs for collaborative stories.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know. It may have been the different models that did that as part of it. I do agree with Ryan that the visibility of actual plays certainly had a big effect too.
By the way, they want to know, did you play Kingmaker, Ryan? Or just
I have not. I did not play Kingmaker.
Yeah, I didn't play
Yeah.
Kingmaker either.
I played so over Christmas break. I played the new D&D game, which is on Steam in preview.
Baldur's Gate 3.
The Baldur's Gate 3 game.
Oh,
And then I played Wrath of the Righteous.
good. Baldur's Gate 3. It's so good that I had to stop playing because I was like, oh my god, I gotta wait till
good. It is
that
good.
is so. First, also the setting and the concept, because I've read all the Dritz
Cool.
books, and the background between the Elder Brains and Mind Flayers is fascinating of how their world
pretty cool.
works,
Yeah.
and they're gonna explore that. I'm like, all right, you won. You won. That's how quickly they got me. I was like, all right, I'm playing this.
Very cool.
It is very good.
I love a good CRPG, and personally for me, I don't find them to be like they're not replacements. Like the
Right.
CRPG experience and the TRPG experience are just not the same thing.
Mhm.
They're related in the same way that a movie and a TV show are related. They're not the same thing.
Right. But those guys, that's going to be, I am looking forward to when that comes out. See, that's when you'll probably stop playing Pathfinder. It's like, you're like, what can get me up? Baldur's Gate 3. Okay, I finished everything I can. I got 700 hours in time for put in another 700 hours.
Right. Exactly.
So King Graham Johnson for $9.99 said, I'm a little late, but I had asked a few weeks ago what would happen if D&D joined Orc. Hearing Ryan say that too was so awesome. Ryan, what do you think that would look like?
I mean, okay, right. They have a problem right now. And the problem is that D&D is connected to this enormous library of content via the OGL, via 1.0a. Enormous library of content. And that's great. It's great for D&D, and it's great for all the publishers, and it's great for all the players. It's fantastic. Now they have done this crazy thing. They've essentially created two parallel worlds for D&D. There's a Creative Commons BY, CC BY world, and then there's the OGL world. Right now, there's nothing in the CC BY world except for the 5.1 system reference document. So it's an island. You could start adding content to that island, but right now there's essentially nothing on that island. The people that are involved in Orc are the people who generated most of the content in the OGL 1.0a world, and they're going to move forward. So they're going to want in the future to move their audiences into the Orc environment, which means they're going to leave the OGL 1.0a environment behind. So either D&D stays in OGL 1.0 and is so strong that eventually the Orc people either just go back to using it, or they dual license to get their content into both worlds, or the D&D people decide, well, let's stop fighting the tides of history. Maybe the Orc initiative gives us things we're not currently getting with the OGL. We can go into the Orc Alliance and become a part of that world. And we will bring with us all the D&D brand equity and value that we have control over. And that will be a positive reinforcing loop. It will be a reason for more people to use Orc, and D&D will benefit because more people are using Orc. Like it could be a very positive, feedback loop. Why I would be advising Wizards to be involved right now is that they should be involved in drafting that license. They have more experience with open gaming than any other company on earth, and they can provide very valuable insights to the people drafting that license into the kinds of experiences and problems that they've had, and make that license better. And so I think there's a lot of upside to them for doing it. Obviously, like we talked about before, the last thing that Hasbro wants right now is more news articles about Wizards of the Coast, Dungeons and Dragons, and open gaming. So if they were going to do something, would probably do it very quietly and behind the scenes. There probably wouldn't be any kind of formal announcement in the short term. It would be a longer term strategy, maybe a medium term strategy, to kind of get them through the 2023 period and into some other world where they're not as damaged as they are right now. And if I was advising the Orc people, I would say you should meet them halfway. Like if they have serious concerns, you should try to address them, because having Wizards of the Coast be a part of the Orc Alliance is going to make the Orc Alliance massively stronger. Instantly, it will be the most important thing in that space. It's an important thing right now. It would instantly be the most important thing. So it would be worth it to see if you could find common ground with those guys, even though they just tried to stab you in the back. Like, you're going to have to get past that. That's history. That happened. Now you need to figure out how to move forward.
Do you see any downside for Wizards to join the Orc Alliance?
Yeah, there's downside. I wouldn't be surprised if there are relaxed trademark enforcement mechanisms in Orc. There's no license, so it's all debatable, right?
Right.
But right now, under the OGL, Wizards has an ironclad protection of its trademarks and a defense against claims of compatibility that doesn't exist in regular trademark law.
Not because SRC's in Creative Commons, so I think it got diluted a little already.
Yeah, well, of course, absolutely. But then you have to go play on that island. Like, you can't get that with OGL, right? So that's a thing that they could potentially see as a downside. I suspect there could be reputational problems for them moving into that space. Like, there could be people in that space who don't want them in that space. Like I said, they just tried to stab a bunch of people in the heart. So some of those people might say, "Screw it, we don't want it. We don't want to work with Wizards of the Coast." And if Wizards is in, we're not in. And then that's bad, right? Then you're splintering the community again, which nobody wants to see happen. So it would have to be very delicate negotiations, I think, to get to a place where you were making most of the people happy. And I don't know what appetite they have, or the time that they have, or I don't even know who would do that. Like, I don't know who their champion is to try to make that happen inside that company. I'm not saying that person doesn't exist. I don't know. It's opaque to me.
That makes sense. Jonathan Rothmare for $5 said, an AI that calculated math as an app the Dungeon Master uses would be cool, but an AI telling me that the dragon is snarky, fun? ? So I guess they're implying that that's not as fun if that AI is telling them the personality of the monsters.
By the way,
I think it's all speculative as to how much.
You know what, though?
Right.
I just want to say something. Like, this has been done. Diablo 3, Diablo 1 is all templated, modular,
procedurally generated.
So Diablo 3 too. Diablo 4 is supposed to be ridiculous and supposed to be mind-blowing what they're doing with the procedurally generated content. This can be done. This has been solved years ago. Okay, this is not new.
On the other hand, when you were setting up your encounter, if you said the dragon is snarky, and then the AI's snarky dragon was really good, like, it would make your player's experience awesome, because the dragon would be great.
Yeah, I don't think it would be that hard to give them personalities and have personality matrices.
Maybe you pick and the AI does it. And and if you're the kind of person that's great at improv and you don't want somebody putting words in your dragon's mouth, then you just do it. Take control. Like,
presumably,
your hands on the wheel.
Ability to choose what you're going to do.
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine a million variations on that theme, right? Yeah.
So Scott Graham for $2 said that ChatGPT ran an interactive adventure for me. We're back at the super chats when we were talking about AIs. And then the third one, Shadowy Insights for $5 said, with this talk of AI DMs and automated VTTs, why would someone want that over a video game? Is this a middle ground that's for no one?
So I would argue that you would want it if you wanted to have a game that just was more fun. Like we used to, I'm sure people have heard me say this. We used to joke all the time that D&D is 20 minutes of fun packed into 4 hours. Like, let's have 4 hours of fun packed into 4 hours. Wouldn't that be better?
It's called an MMO. Actually,
some people thought that was the path.
Yeah,
like that was
yeah.
4 hours of fun packed into 4 hours.
Actually, it was more like
It's a
two. It was like
different kind of
2.5 hours
experience.
of fun packed into 4.
Okay, that's
there
true.
was a lot of waiting around, but even that was
Yeah,
fun.
that's
Even the
very
waiting
true, very
around
true.
was kind of fun in MMOs. But yes, but I totally 100% agree. But they're going down the video game path. Like like a TTRPG right now is 20 minutes of fun packed into 4 hours.
Yeah. That's no good.
I agree from the money point of view, and also from the money point of view is that you need a DM, and the very first thing that they're going to do is figure out a way to play the game without a DM. And they're going to make it that you can play without a party, which MMOs will also figure it out. It's like, oh, we have ways to find groups for you. We have AIs, and why can't we put this into D&D? There's no reason not to.
Yep.
Yeah, that makes sense. So we got through the AI questions. Alan Animus for $2 said that technically with CC 4.0, WotC is a third-party 5e creator because Creative Commons is owned by a separate entity.
Sure.
I guess. Mr. Blawface for $5 said, what do you think about people who think all this info shouldn't have been leaked as now Hasbro won't invest in WotC as heavily as they would have?
Oh, let me tell you about
that's
Wizards
actually
of the Coast
an interesting question.
Most of the profit that comes out of Hasbro comes from Wizards of the Coast. Hasbro and Wizards of the Coast are in an unequal partnership where Wizards has most of the leverage, and the leaking out of Wizards of the Coast is not going to affect that at all. Hasbro needs Wizards way more than Wizards needs Hasbro. That has been, I think, adequately shown by a ton of outside investment analysis. So, if anything, there are humans inside Wizards of the Coast who are in a much weaker position, either employment-wise or power-wise. But the organization of Wizards of the Coast, they haven't. I don't think they've lost anything.
Yeah, I think that's pretty clear because there's just information that came out fourth quarter. Wizards went up, the rest of Hasbro went down, and
that's right.
The only cushion for Hasbro was the Wizards had gone up.
Yep, that's right.
So Max Lyon for $5 said, any update on Battles of Bestiary for 5e Fantasy Grounds?
Okay.
I'm switching one group over to PIP2e, but another is sticking with 5e. Thanks for all that you do.
All right, let me tell you how this works. It's actually very annoying because I'm actually a little pissed. The way it works at Fantasy Grounds is Fantasy Grounds has a weird system is that anyone can develop anything for Fantasy Grounds, and then the developer gets a small percentage of the sales. So it's basically, if I develop Battles of Bestiary, I get some of the sales, Fantasy Grounds gets some of the sale, and the developer gets some of the sales. So it's actually an interesting system. It's like a consignment system. So it's in the best interest for people then to develop for Fantasy Grounds and do a good job. What happens is Fantasy Grounds puts out a call for people to take and sort of claim a product to develop for you. And I actually have little to no say in it. And someone claimed it and took these products and disappeared off the face of the earth. And Fantasy Grounds has tried to contact them. And if they don't get back to them soon, then they'll release the product. And then I could actually then have someone else develop it. So it's, believe it or not, out of my hands, which is weird. So
that is really weird.
It is weird. So I have to coordinate with Fantasy Grounds, and then the person has to do it, and that's where I'm at. Because after last time, like 2 weeks ago, I mentioned this, and a lot of Fantasy Ground developers came out of the woodwork, but I can assign it to somebody, but I need it to be released by the people who are currently assigned to it, or they have to finish it. Those are the two options, and right now it's kind of a holding pattern. Long story short is I'm on it, and just be a little patient. Roll20 and Foundry, I do personally work with the developers, so I have no issues with that. So
Grendel Mraz explained their previous question about the walled garden and said, essentially, I'm asking if the previous analogy is equivalent to the main tabletop RPG community temporarily just owning WotC for doing something embarrassing. That was the question about them saying we don't know them when asked about WotC. Then let's see. Claudia McFive for $5 New Zealand said, my 12-year-old still excited to play RPG. Now 14-year-old still playing IGM for the family. And then there are 2 AltaFox questions. Daniel Othir sent $3 and said chances AltaFox succeeds next time. And Ninth Ant sent $7 Canadian and said would love to see AltaFox on a future Roll for Combat interview.
So would I. I've reached out to them.
I'd watch that episode.
I know. I keep reaching out to them, and I can talk to them because, yeah, I do a lot of investing, so I've been following the story very closely, and I would love to talk to them. I've reached out to them a couple of times. They haven't come. I've heard nothing, but I'd be very happy to talk high level with them, and I'd be very curious to hear what they said. So.
And we made it. We made it through we're up to date now.
Okay, we're up to date, which is amazing. Probably can't go forever, but Ryan, what's going on with Japan? I hear you're doing something cool in your real life.
Oh yeah, so our company is getting ready to do a Kickstarter for a new tabletop board game called Let's Go to Japan. And the basic idea is that you are planning your ideal trip to Japan. And we think it is a new kind of play pattern. And it is, the way it works is that the first part of the game, you're planning your trip by drafting cards and slotting them into the days of your trip. And then the second part is you narrate your experiences on your trip to Japan.
Wow.
So it has like a board game element, and then it has kind of a role-playing element where you tell your friends what you did each day of your trip to Japan. And so if you've ever been interested in going to Japan, if a trip to Japan has always been something you've had on your bucket list, this is a cool way to kind of simulate that experience. And it's all real. So you could actually plan a week-long trip to Japan using Let's Go to Japan.
Wow. What city
it was designed by Josh Wood. Josh also designed The Cat Lady and Santa Monica. And he's developed a ton of our games, including the Guild of Merchant Explorers. And it's going to be on Kickstarter, I think, in April.
Where does it go? Is it just Tokyo, or does it go to like Kyoto or a few other places?
It goes to both Tokyo and Kyoto.
Okay.
And there's a mechanism where you have to take a bullet train if you want to go between the two cities. One of the resources of the game is it's essentially fatigue. So you have to carefully manage your trips between the two cities. You don't want to get too fatigued on the train. When you tell your story, you don't want to talk about sleeping on the train all day. So yeah, it's pretty cool. Josh is a Japanophile, and he has been learning Japanese for a long time. And this game happened because he had actually been planning a trip to Japan just before the pandemic happened. And since he couldn't go and he was stuck at home, he turned all that work into a game. So we're super happy to bring this thing to market. It should be really exciting.
So weird because my lifelong dream was to go to Japan, and I went in 2019, and that's exactly what we did. We flew to Tokyo, stayed there for one day, and then took the bullet train to Kyoto, and then stayed there, and then went back. I was like, oh my God, we could have used this game to plan our trip to Japan. This is awesome.
Exactly.
Are you going to stand by the fact that high-scoring victory point trips to Japan will be good trips for a person to actually take on Japan? Or could there wind up being some degenerate strategy where, I don't know, you visit the same zoo like 30 times that somehow gives a lot of points?
Japan's pretty big.
I'm pretty sure that the worst case scenario is you're just going to have a very exotic and unusual trip to Japan.
Well,
I don't think you're going to have you're not going to go back and forth to the sushi restaurant. That's a
genius idea, because then you can do, let's go visit New York, or let's go visit LA. Well,
knock on wood, Stephen. Yes. Let's hope that happens.
So if you ever want
to Let's Go brand.
Ever want to do New York, as a lifelong Manhattanite New Yorker, you call me up.
Okay, you will be on the list of people to talk to for sure.
Seriously.
Yeah, I would love for Let's Go to become a brand. It would be great.
That's a great idea. I love that concept too. And Japan's interesting because it's one of these, you've heard of all these places, but unless you've been to there, and especially, it's funny how much I play, like you'll play a lot of games like the Persona series and stuff, and then you'll see, some of the areas that are, in Japan, in real world Japan, in the games, and then you go to the real ones, and you're like, wow, it's just like the video game. It's like it's supposed to be the other way around. So you can be like, wow, it's just like just go to Japan. It's just like the board game.
Exactly. Yeah,
that's a great idea.
We're looking forward to people telling us that they did things in the game and then they went and did them in real life. I think that's going to be super cool.
That's a great. That could be a new Ticket to Ride. That's a great idea.
Yeah, but knock on wood.
Let's
make that happen.
I love it. So, that's a great idea.
Ollie Wright said Akihabara.
Yes,
Akihabara. Yeah.
Akihabara.
I love stuff. Akihabara is awesome. by the way. Awesome.
Yep.
There was another one
very
before
cool. Thanks
that
for
one.
letting me make that plug.
Oh, of course. Well, you've created some of my favorite games of all time. I mean, that was a Deadlands.
Doomtown.
Doomtown. I keep saying Deadlands. Doomtown.
Well, it was Deadlands Doomtown. That's the brand. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's why. It's the same thing. Oh, man. I love that game so much.
Yeah, good.
I love that game.
Right on.
I know we talked about it last time, but I still can't think about it. I'm like, I wish that brand was still around because it was so cool. The art and the concept of poker and just the whole theme of it was brilliant. I loved it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it gets back to our conversation a little bit ago about the AI and the complexity of games.
Mm-hmm.
Doomtown, for those of you who don't know, Doomtown is a game where you literally play poker. The cards are regular trading card game cards and they're poker cards.
Yeah.
Well, there's a whole system for poker we don't have to explain. Like this complicated, weird thing of suits and cards and straights and flushes and pairs. And yeah, everybody knows how to play poker. Like the rules load is minimal. You already know how to play.
Yep.
Oh, wait.
So let's see.
Wait, Watsy supposedly just dropped some news while we were streaming.
Oh, really?
Oh, wait, what did they say?
I don't know.
Or do you mean the thing where they put up the FAQ? Because that was up before the stream.
Let's see. Well, you guys
it was
keep
up
talking.
slightly
I'm gonna look
before
up the
I
news.
thought, or I saw it at least like around the beginning of the stream. Just has information. There's a little bit of there's a little bit of weirdness with the checkboxes to show you that DM's Guild has fun features like Watsy might consider to publish your content in their books, which is not that fun of a feature at all if you didn't want them to publish your content for free. But I mean, it didn't seem that bad. I glanced over it during the early parts of this stream. They did put up an FAQ. It didn't try to. I was wondering if their description of the 1.0A would try to put in something in there, being like, it's a thing we could have deauthorized at any time, but we chose not to, and they didn't do anything. I didn't notice anything like that. Where they
I don't even know where
weird.
This is. I can't even find anything. So
yeah, I can't remember where I got it, but I went to a link and I saw it before. There might be a link in like the OGL server, Steven.
Whatever. I'll look.
So,
but I'd be curious.
Yeah, we got a couple super chats there. Bueno Kitty for $10 said, is 5e content purchased and used on VTTs affected by the current situation? Could WotC enforce you may use Magic Missile but not animated to block the content in existing packages? They're not going to. They back down on that policy. As far as we know, it would be weird for them to then go back and do it after they said that they aren't. I think they would look too bad. There's no way they're going to expose themselves to that. For all the reasons Ryan said, they wouldn't do even another like nice, good move because they don't want to get that out in there. Doing a mean move would just be a self-inflicted wound. Mark J for $5 said, here late, will rewatch. Just wanted to personally thank Ryan and y'all for the amazing work to help organize the community to defend the OGL.
You're welcome. It worked.
We won.
Yay.
Now what? Now we go to Japan. Yay!
Right, that's right.
Yeah, I mean, that's the question of the episode. Where do we go from here? The answer is apparently Japan.
Hey, man.
Someone had an idea for an expansion in the chat where kaiju attack you during your trip to Japan, and then it like adds an extra layer of complexity.
That's the expansion.
Going to Japan.
That's the expansion set. It's like, let's go to Japan.
Goes to Japan. That's a whole other
thing. That would be so funny, though. You're like, let's go to Japan, and then during the trip, I imagine there has to be like unforeseen things that happen during your trip to like shake it up.
I wrote a micro expansion for Santa Monica where zombies attack the beach, and Josh didn't like it very much. So I'm not gonna suggest the kaiju attack of let's go to
Josh is not gonna like that either.
No, he's not. Yeah.
That's
zombies. Gothic Shark for $10 said, I was a whale for D&D Beyond. I own everything. I was a DM. I will never DM or play D&D again, learning Pathfinder 2e.
You'll love it. I guarantee it. You're going to love it. It's a great game. Great game. Last night, we fought a lesser death mark Scyther, and they ran away screaming because they could not freaking touch that thing.
One of the few most overpowered monsters around.
Wow, is that thing hard?
If you have the right strategy, you can beat it because it is counterable, but there's no reason you might know that you were going to fight it other than that it's like the Grim Reaper come to kill you. And
it's like, what are you fighting? It's the Grim Reaper. Like, no, really, what is it? It's a Grim Reaper. You're going to die. And they're like, okay, let's see how bad it is. And they went up against it. And you have to roll twice. Always. You get disadvantage in every roll. And then you're like, yeah, we're leaving. It's like, we can't even hit this thing, even if we tried. It's like... Its
reaction is scary, too.
Oh,
but
they
just
did
like
reaction.
In the real world, we sometimes use humor to deal with death as a topic. Hideous Laughter is a really good spell against a lesser death because you can stop them from taking their ridiculous reaction to teleport and scythe you.
That's what happened. Like, someone got smart. He's like, okay, I run away and I fire my bow at it. And it's like, good idea. He teleports to you, attacks you, crits you. 90 points of damage. And they're like, okay, we're leaving. It's like, we're done fighting this thing. We're going to die. If it was a
regular non-lesser death, then they would have been killed by that crit. And then their soul would have been destroyed.
Yeah, that's right. It was only a CR16 lesser death.
Ollie Wright paid €2 to want to hear about the strategy to fight a lesser death. So the strategy to fight a lesser death in general is you put up a Hideous Laughter on it so that it can't use its reaction, even if it makes the save, even unless it critically succeeds. Keep sustaining the spell so that it cannot use that reaction, because that reaction, like Steven said, is going to wreck you. Then you try to get up some random weak fortune effect that on yourself as much as possible if you can, that can counteract that roll twice
the misfortune effect, which is atrocious.
If you have somebody in your party with weird like anti-curse abilities, or like at the worst case scenario, you could at least be like a curse eater archetype that like when they get cursed they get happy because they go into their curse mode. And if you do stuff like that, the Hideous Laughter is the key. It's not quite as bad, but they're still really, really strong for their level. The last super chat that we have for right now, Odin Olveson for 100 Norwegian krona said, hi from Norway. Got into 5e last year, have invested a lot, not quitting. I will also support third-party creators like those doing Drakar, Auk, Daemonar, Drakes and Demons, Dragonbane from Sweden. Heard of him?
I think that's to you guys. I've heard of them.
Is that a question? Have we heard of them?
Yeah, I've heard of those games.
The question, it sort of didn't have a punctuation mark, but then it went to Sweden, heard of them, and I think it was a question.
I've heard of Dragonbane. I've heard of these games. I haven't played them, but I've heard of them. So.
Yeah, can't speak to that.
Yeah. All right, let's do this as the last. Let's do the last one.
Okay, so the last super chat is Bueno Kitty for 10 Canadian dollars. Ryan Dancey, amazing insights and interview as always. You mentioned the tabletop RPG enhanced by augmented reality. Can we hear your sales pitch for that?
Oof.
I guess my sales pitch is just I want to make a game where you have 4 hours of fun packed into 4 hours. That's my sales pitch. I want to increase the fun by decreasing the load on the players and making it possible to play the game, to spend most of the time playing the game and less of the time preparing to play the game.
Do you think anything kind of succeeds now with that? Like anything like, I mean, I think Gloomhaven, except for the setup, mostly succeeds at that.
Yeah, I do think that is true. I think that I think there are character generators. People are using character builders to make characters that are allowing them to make a lot more complicated characters than they would have been comfortable doing just working their way through the rule books. So that's an improvement. That's before the game, so that's reducing the prep time. That's good. I don't really think there's anything on the tabletop right now that is making the DM's job easier.
The only thing I would say is I do like the demon board, the fight board, the pad, the battle pad. I've been using that for like 20 years, where you get the little magnets and you can put everyone's name on it and then organize where they are. That I think that was like a third-party product, and then I think Paizo bought it and now they do it. It's I've been using that in my live games, and it's really fast because it's all magnets, and like it's a magnetic board. It's easy. It's dry erase. You just write what you need. It's great. That, and I used to do little magneted markers with little flags. Like if you're dazed or confused, and then the flags would magnet each other. So the more effects on you, the longer the stream of flags. So you'd see like 8 flags on you. It's like, man, you are not doing well, buddy. It's like a lot of things, but But yeah,
so we did get one more.
We got one more. That'll be it.
Dragoon of Kyrie said, "Hey, I'm new. Wanted to hear your take on the changes on the SRD reference page. Noticed it was changed yesterday on the 30th. That's the thing we talked about before with the new FAQ. I did go and look for the link when I saw that another person asked about it. I put it in our chat that the three of us are in. But it just has some more information on it. I didn't think it was that objectionable or anything. It just kind of talks about the Creative Commons as one of the options now.
Oh yeah, and Gloomhaven, someone pointed out, is doing an RPG Kickstarter this year. And you know who's in charge of she's working from we know, you know her too. BJ, she's working on that.
Ah, cool.
Yeah. From Hero Lab.
Yep. BJ Hensley.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, I actually personally, if you have Gloomhaven and want to play Gloomhaven, I personally recommend Oathsworn instead. I think it's vastly.
Boy, I've heard good things about that.
Oh, it's vastly superior than Gloomhaven.
Yeah, heard a lot of good things about Oathsworn.
So good. We are playing it, and it is. Our guy's like hardcore hard. This thing is hard. I was like, we are really struggling, which we love. It's a tough game, and the story is incredible. It's
I heard good things about it.
Really good. I think they took the formula and perfected it. So, my 2 cents.
Steven is a big fan of it, so
I can tell.
Well, because you know what? Because I thought Oathsworn. I thought Gloomhaven was revolutionary. Because I played Monster Death Kingdom a lot, and that was the first step of having the AI card deck, which obviously people have copied since then. But I felt it was too dark and too hard and too random. You had Gloomhaven, which definitely was better, but about halfway through, I find it very repetitive, and the story was way too slow. And then you have Oathsworn, where the story is fantastic. It's fast. You get to make decisions, do things, it branches in different cool directions. I played chapter 1 4 times, and every time it was completely different, because that's how much the story branches. And then the combat is hard as hell. So all my favorite things rolled into one. There you go. So, yeah, it's coming our regular thing. It'll be our monthly thing, Ryan. Just come on and we'll talk about your new Kickstarters, and we'll talk about what's going on in your company, because you guys are always coming out with stuff, because you got a big company.
We'll bring the board game love to the RPG community.
I love board games, man. I love them maybe more than role-playing games. I don't know. It's tough. It's tough. It's like saying which of your 2 children you love more.
Exactly right.
You love them both equally. At least that's
you're just a gamer of all types, Steven, because you also love MMOs.
And I love video games. That's the thing. I love them. I love them all. Yep. It's tough. But the beautiful thing is I don't have to choose. I can play them all.
Well, I want to thank both you guys for having me on the show a couple weeks ago. Like I was telling you before the show started, after doing your show, I woke up the next morning. I just said, I have to do something. And that's when I started that change.org petition. Wow. It was really being on the show and kind of walking through all that old history and reconnecting myself with all the battles that we fought all those years ago, really kind of got the fire up in me to try to make something happen to preserve all that. So I really appreciate the opportunity you guys gave me to have a platform to dig in, root around in all that old psychology.
Wow. So we got the fires going.
Yeah, exactly.
We enjoyed having you here on the show. It was just a very cogent explanation of all of the information that I feel like a lot of viewers have sent messages to us or to me saying that particular show really helped them understand, whereas a lot of other things had a piece of what was going on. It felt like more they understood the narrative of everything.
Oh, that's good.
Oh yeah, people loved it, and plus they felt they could trust it. Like it wasn't secondhand information. Like this was coming from your lips, so people were like, "Okay, this is what's going on," and they knew exactly what was happening, what was at stake, and what they had to do to fix it.
Yeah,
and I think it worked. Good. I think it was I think it was a big help in the fight. Quite frankly.
Yep. Me too. Big time.
Yeah.
So. Ollie Wright for €2 had one last thing that was added on, which is you could run Blades in the Dark on the channel.
Well, which channel? This one?
I guess so.
Okay. I guess we could.
There you go.
We could run anything. I run Pathfinder on the channel twice a week, so could run Blades of the Dark one day.
Don't you have one coming up soon?
What do you mean? Oh, I had it yesterday. It's every Sunday.
It was yesterday. Yeah,
Sunday and Monday.
I knew there was one around.
Sunday and Monday is when we do our show. But they're in there, so you can watch them. And we had a pretty fun one. You could watch us fight the Lesser Death on the channel, and you could watch everyone scream and yell and cry and run away. It's right there, and it's funny as hell. They knew something was up when the captain was escorting the bad guy out, and he goes, "This is great! What a big win, and I'm only 2 weeks from retirement." And everyone was like, "Oh no, we're all gonna die." I was like, the old cliche, I'm 2 weeks from retirement, and he didn't die though. I was nice. I didn't kill him off. I felt too bad. I couldn't kill him off. He's 2 weeks from retirement. Well, thanks again, Ryan, and I'm sure we will be going to Japan in a few weeks or months. I'd love to see that. Yeah, I want to definitely see that game being played. I want to try that out because that sounds like an awesome, fun game. So
yeah, cool stuff.
Yeah. All right, Ryan.
All right, guys.
I will talk to you, I'm sure, in the near future, and then con season starts up, and then we'll see you.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.